Any questions? That's a good question.
Hi, Francis. I'm curious if, the topic is energy, and if energy is only on the relative level, or is the absolute also energy?
What you have to define energy, because with my scientific background, for me, energy evokes like someone pushing a load up a slope. So that's what it means for me. So
when I'm referencing that, like beliefs, I don't know for sure, but it just seems like that is energy, and that can be released or dissolved. It can dissolve back into the space.
You mean manifestation?
Yes, yes.
Shakti.
Right. And contraction or identification.
That's different. That's ignorance. Ignorance is not the same thing as Shakti. Because you can have a Shakti without ignorance. You cannot have ignorance without manifestation. You have several, what is beautiful with the Indian tradition is that they have Sanskrit terms that are very precise and that apply to everything we talk about here. So the primordial, the primeval reality is Brahman. Or also Shiva in its dissolution aspect. Then out of this reality, the world, all the appearances are created, Shakti, what you call the energy. But the energy is not different from the source of the energy. In the West, we see the creation as an emanation of God the Creator, just as a potter creates a pot, and then the pot has a life independently from the potter. Whereas in the Indian tradition, they have the metaphor of the seed of the banyan tree. The seed apparently is very tiny, and the banyan tree, as you know, can be quite large. And the seed, which is almost invisible, therefore almost nothing, represents the unmanifested creative force. And the banyan tree that originates out of this seed represents the entire universe. If you will, that one is a vacuum and the other thing is the universe after the Big Bang. So in these metaphors, what is interesting about the metaphor of the seed and the tree is that it is the seed that becomes the tree. You see, while the tree is present, the seed doesn't exist independently from the tree. The seed has become the tree. It's very different from the Western view in which God as a creator creates the tree but remains out of there, if you will, in sitting quietly on its cloud and, with a finger creating the tree. So here it's different. It's a very different, more down to earth, if I can use this metaphor, view of the creation. The energy, Shiva has become Shakti. Shakti and Shiva are not, in fact, separate. They are the same thing. It's just a kind of a transformation, but they are the same reality. A little bit like, these images for the children when you would see a tree or a landscape, and then looking in the foliage of the tree, you will see a face. You will see a witch, let's say, the face of a witch with a hat and everything. And but sometimes you see the tree, sometimes you see the witch, but it's the same thing. So here it's the same. The reality is one. Sometimes you can see it as the unmanifested, but when the manifested is present, the unmanifested is there, the same as the substance of the manifested. So that's about Shakti. Now there is another level, which is called Maya. Maya could be described as being the ignorance at the cosmic level, cosmic ignorance. It is the creation of a world which seems to exist independently from consciousness. Just so that this world having an existence independent from consciousness is a little bit like a mirage in the desert. You see, in the desert you see the mirage, it seems to be there, it seems to be quite independent from the air, from the light, from whatever, but as you move towards it, you realize it was made of basically thin air and whatever reflection on or whatever it was, right? And so that's Maya. But you can have Maya without ignorance. It's still different from ignorance, because the sage is free from ignorance, but he can still see Maya. In other words, he can still see she can still see the world as seeming to have a separate existence. The difference between the sage and the ignorant, which is the other level, avidya, ignorance, is that the sage, although he sees the mirage, knows it is a mirage. It is like someone in the desert who lives there, a Bedouin or some guy there, they don't go for mirages any longer. Right? They have their own water here, But the Westerner, in the desert for the first time, he said, "Oh, I want to let's go swim," So that's ignorance. So these are all the various levels. Shiva, but in fact Brahman, Shakti, Maya, avidya. So now, what's your question?
No more questions.
Hi, Francis. question, as usual, on a personal experience.
The other friend, who is a member of the same club, sent me a message, and he told me he's getting better.
Well, I'm getting worse in a different way, though. So I find myself getting more and more interested in seeking the truth. And as a result, say I can't wait until the nighttime to go home and, let's say, go read upon some book like I Am That or something in that, like Robert Adams, whatnot. And when I'm doing it, especially at nighttime, which I'm very tired, my mind is not really that strong, and I feel, I can read things through my heart and really appreciate things. Yet, during trying to conceptualize all those things that I read, and at some point I really felt, and then suddenly become just some abstract things. And I try to, I suffer. And I'm trying to get to this point where I really got it at some point, but somehow now it just feels so abstract. And how can I get to that point again? And the feeling is like I feel miserable. And I just wonder if you have something to say about that.
Okay.
One more thing before you go. I also don't see the very presence that I'm looking for through this seeking. Is I find myself aloof, like I'm not even talking to people, or people go by and I don't see them. I can't see the presence in me anymore. It's gotten worse. Okay, I'm done.
You are loading me with questions, and I'm getting old, and my short-term memory is not that good. So now I've lost both questions. So going back to the senior moment, the first one.
Like things are becoming abstract, and I'm really trying hard to get back.
What you mean by things, if I understand well what you are saying, the feeling that things are abstract, you mean they are just intellectual games.
Exactly.
And they are just like dreams. They are not real. I don't reach reality, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, and you know, that's something, you are not the only one in this case. It happened to me when I was 17. I already before, because I had read Plato and other Greek philosophers, a few other Greek philosophers before, but when I was 16, 17, we had our first, in our senior year in high school, we had this philosophy class. And to me, it seemed to be, philosophy seemed to be just intellectual games. That's why I decided then to learn more, to study science, to read math and physics rather than reading philosophy in college. But later on I realized that I was mistaken. That my assumption that thought couldn't really deliver something tangible, something real, was itself a misguided thought. And the reason is this, the reason that in fact thought can deliver. What is thought supposed to deliver in this case? It is supposed to deliver the experience of consciousness. And usually, a normal thought, an ordinary thought, doesn't deliver its referent. Meaning, if I think of a chair, the thought of a chair is not going to bring me a chair. Right? So a thought usually doesn't directly deliver its referent, whether its referent is subtle or gross. It will require some further action, especially if it is gross, to get the referent, to buy a chair, or to get to some place where I can get one. However, there is an important exception to this seemingly universal law. And this exception is about consciousness. Any thought about consciousness, in fact, appears in consciousness, exists in consciousness, and when it vanishes, delivers consciousness, provided the attention, the love, the interest is directed towards consciousness. So that should cure you from this disease, which is the belief that thinking is useless as far as visualizing consciousness. It is true that mere thinking is not going to do it, because it is not a thought that has access to consciousness. Only consciousness can see consciousness. However, the thought that seeks consciousness is a vehicle that takes you to consciousness. Just it is the cab that takes you to the party. Of course, the cab and its driver are not invited to the party, right? But the cab still is useful in order to get you there. Right? So think of the thoughts about consciousness not as a useless waste of time, but as the cab that takes you to the door.
Pressure off. So that's really helpful, by the way. However, I remember you once said that you can, the way to measure it is how happy you are, like to see whether you're on the right path or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes the thought does not leave me with a happy feeling. It just leaves me with struggle and trying to get to somewhere, and misery.
Yeah, it takes time for this happiness to reveal itself. But the first sign of this happiness is a rediscovered enthusiasm. In the beginning, this enthusiasm seems to be solely about the teachings. Mm-hmm. You get enthusiastic about the teaching. Whenever you get obsessed, seemingly obsessed by the teaching, and that's a very good sign. It's a sign that you have caught the freedom virus. You have been infected, so that's a very good sign. And then this virus, the illness follows its course, and it's lethal. So how long it takes? Well, it depends. It's like how long does it take for the barrel of the gun to cool off after, according to the military user's manual? The answer is a certain time. What? That's how it works in the military. People who have served in uniforms, they know what I mean. Yes, where was I?
Yeah, like how long it takes.
Yeah, a certain time. And what else? The second question?
What was my second question? Oh, yeah, the presence. Like, I've lost the ordinary presence I have with people.
Yeah,
that
good.
I find myself into myself, and people want to talk to me, and I'm not there. I'm in my head.
No, not in your head. You are doing what you find more interesting at that time. There is nothing wrong with that. People want to draw you into doing things that you're less interested in, and you are more interested in something. Well, it's a free country. Value this search. You see, give it, recognize it, give it value. It has its value. It's very important.
I just
People, they want to take you down at their level of, I don't know, gossiping or whatever. I mean, you can pay lip service to this, just not to. You have to be a little bit like a diplomat, you know. You know the story about diplomats?
No.
No. Okay, that's that. What's the difference between a lady and a diplomat? So, the difference is as follows. If a lady says no, it means maybe. If she says maybe, it means yes. And if she says yes, she's not a lady. Now, if a diplomat says yes, it means maybe. If he says maybe, it means no. And if he says no, he's not a diplomat. So that's the answer.
Hi, Francis. I wanted to thank you for your meditation instruction at the start today, specifically to allow our thoughts just to go on and not try to do anything with them, because I arrived here in a very upset mood. When I was leaving home, I found my wife had parked the car across the driveway trying to block me from coming up here. So I had to back off and drive over the grass to get out of our driveway. And so that upset me all the way up here, but I found that just rather than trying to control my thinking or focus on breathing or something, I just let it go, and it dissipated pretty quickly, the stress that I was carrying with me. And then when you also mentioned about the third eye and allowing it to open, maybe you could elaborate on that, because for many, many years I've had maybe sensations of pressure in my forehead. It's kind of analogous to it seems like a wet blanket going tumbling in a dryer, tumbling, you know, thump, 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 kind of like that. And that's all it ever does. And I don't know if I should just ignore that, or, you know, it's just been going on for years. And I hope it doesn't mean my head's going to explode someday and do something weird. But maybe you could comment on that.
I could give you the yogic version of the opening of the Ajna chakra, but I'm going to give you the westernized version. We tend to localize ourselves in the forehead and also behind the eyes, because the two important functions are there. We are the seer and we are the thinker. And when we are identifying, if you become aware of it, you will see that most of the time, that which you are identifying with is the seer or the thinker. It's less common to identify with the hearer or with the smeller or whatever, but the seer and the thinker are really. So the other important place of identification is the feeler, and the feeler is more here. But the thinker and the seer, they are here. And in order to have something of substance to identify with, we have created sensations for that purpose here. And these in fact, they are tiny contractions that involve more or less all this area. They involve also the muscles in the eye sockets that move the eyes. And so a rigidity there, tensions there, but tensions in the forehead. You see, often people who are deeply troubled, they are often like that. You know, they have this. Anyway, when this gets relaxed, the sensation is one of expansion, and that we feel more that we are the space behind. And this is, if you will, the opening at the physical level, at the sensation level, the opening of the third eye. So the third eye is not here, really. Here is a contraction that prevents the opening of the third eye. The third eye is, in fact, consciousness itself. So the third eye is in the background of everything. But that which prevents this opening, the roadblock, is here. So at the physical level, you can do some exercises going in this direction. Of course, that's not Advaita. That's the yogic path. But if you feel yourself getting localized often here, you can, on purpose, localize yourself towards the back of the head, doing this exercise. That's a yogic path, once again, but it's also a valid path. So I can also suggest this exercise. Then this opening can happen spontaneously, which is the best way. When I was visiting with my teacher, I had this strange experience happening that I would feel the back of my head expanding and this opening taking place. And it was not that my teacher was doing anything special. Sometimes we were meditating, sometimes I was asking him questions about the truth, but sometimes we would just be gossiping. So it didn't matter. Something strange was happening in his presence. That was, in a way, my body recognizing my teacher. You see? And in that case, it was happening by itself. But you can also, in a more, shall I say, laborious way, try to alter the sensations in this area and to localize yourself more in the back of your head. Again, that's not Advaita, it's something else, but who cares?
I remember in Susan Siegel's book, when she was stepping off a bus in Paris, all of a sudden her center of what she thought was herself, she found it localized in above and behind her head. And it persisted like that for many years until she fell into permanent consciousness.
Well, in her case, it's hard to tell, you see, because she had this brain tumor, so we don't know what was what.
This kind of ties in a little bit, that space between falling asleep and being asleep and then waking up. Jung, and I know you've said your teacher also talks about kind of hanging out in that space. And I love doing that. And this morning, I woke up very slowly, was very comfortable. It was a beautiful morning, so I was able to hold that, like no thinking, but it was like the third eye activation with it's all around everywhere. And suddenly I had a vision of you and I standing over by the light switch, and you were showing me how to turn the light up. And the light was on, but you're going, no, you go like this to turn it up. And so I couldn't wait to get here to ask you, okay, how do I turn it up? But since I had that vision, I've been extremely happy. And I think I'm over the 100% mark, and I don't know if that's dangerous or not. It's like almost goofy, silly, happy.
It works in our dreams, you know.
Yeah.
I had this dream one day of my teacher, and I was on a swing. I was a child on a swing, and he was pushing me, you know. And every time I was moving back, you know, on the swing, looking at him, and I was exploding in happiness, you know. And then I was swinging, and then he would push me back, and I was this exhilarating, you know, feeling of a child. And actually in the dream, he wasn't looking at all like my teacher physically, but my heart knew it was him. You know, it was so yeah. I mean, the teaching continues in the dream.
Yeah,
you know,
because the lights were on, which I thought was a good sign, and you were showing me how to make them brighter.
Yeah,
So.
I've had people come to me and telling me, you know, I saw you in a dream, and then I saw your picture, and that's why I'm coming. I said, what did you do to me? I said, well, I didn't do anything. I don't have a switch I can push to call you, you know. If I have to do that, I would give you a call on my phone. But
Well, thanks. But there's no danger in going over the 100%. The Baptist girl in me's going, oh, wait a minute. Can't be too happy.
What happens when things like that happen? Then it's like it carries over to your day, because then this thing is always present, you know, at the background. It's like you know, in physics we have the Big Bang, and we have kind of the residues, you know, of this explosion that still radiates towards us, and we still have this radiation coming, electromagnetic radiation coming from all directions, you know, towards us, which is the residual, of course, of the light, of the explosion, and so that's something like that. You have in the background, you keep this freedom, this absence of burden.
It was very light feeling, and sitting with my friend this morning.
Schwerlosigkeit.
Yes. What does that mean?
absence of burden, but
Yeah,
it's
so I
more
thought,
poet.
okay.
It's
Yeah, it
absence
sounds
of
better.
weight,
Yeah.
weightlessness.
Yes, sounds better that way.
This table hurts. Be careful. No, you went tangentially, that's
It was
okay.
just a grazing blow. I want to go back to the sensation of the expansion at the back of the head that you were just talking about. Is that always a student-teacher relationship?
No,
when that
no, no,
So
no.
that could happen with anyone?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I was just mentioning it as some kind of oddity.
Ah, okay. All right, thank you.
I was just mentioning it from experience, that's all. And it doesn't happen. I was not implying that it has to happen, that this has to happen with everybody. I mean, every path is different. You know, there is not one size fits all type of path. All paths are different.
I'm learning that every day. I had another question that I actually don't really have now, but it comes up a lot when I'm out and about. For many years, I've noticed some kind of altered mental feeling. It's hard to come up with exactly the right words. And it correlates with population density. If I'm driving down the freeway in Los Angeles, there's a particular sort of background. If I go through Sepulveda Pass where there's not very many people, or if I drive up a mountain road where there's not very many people, there's a, oh. And the same thing with times of day. You know, there's kind of a different energy, higher activity, sort of more mental something. I'm struggling here to come up with the right words. That the only effect of it that I notice is that when I'm doing my engineering work, sometimes it's a little harder to concentrate in that level of activity. You know, I work better at night. I'm not sure what my question is. I mean, for many years, I thought this was a problem and I needed to do something about it, and now I almost don't care anymore, but the thoughts sort of keep rolling about it. I guess my question is, what is that?
Yeah. I usually don't like very much to go into spooky areas. The fact that I don't like to go into spooky areas doesn't mean they are not spooky areas. But I'm concerned with losing that which is essential in our conversation, or going into something which is less important, which belongs more to the relative level. And nevertheless, let's make an exception. And after all these caveats, there seems to be for lack of a better word, some kind of, I could say, using a word of the realm, from the realm of physics, entanglement between people and also between people and physical objects or places. Let me give you a few examples. Sacred places. You know, it's very strange that for millennia, people have undertaken pilgrimages to places, you know, sacred places. I mean, there must be something to it, you know, other than some kind of collective hallucination. There is a story, this in fact famous German physicist. The name is von Weizsäcker. And the first time I heard of him, it was when I was in college. There was in quantum mechanics a Weizsäcker matrix that we learned about. But it turns out this professor goes to India. And he finds himself somehow visiting the samadhi, the grave of some sage, perhaps Ramana Maharshi, but I'm not certain of that. So he is this hardcore scientist, right? And he's there, and he has this extraordinary experience, which he cannot account. And then he had the courage to write about it, and his peers think he's a lunatic of some sort. However, the matrix still works. So there must have been something, some entanglement, some with this place. Another example of that. There is a place in Paris. It's called Rue de Rennes, for those who know this place. And it's Rue de Rennes, close to the intersection with Boulevard Saint-Germain. And it is part or very close to the Latin Quarter, where that was my campus. So I didn't have a car. I walked quite often in the area, as you can imagine, doing all kinds of things, mostly looking, finding that the girls were attractive on the sidewalks, and sitting in the bistro, right? What a regular student does, right? Bistro and girl, and there was not that pizza at the time. It was more sandwiches, and. And anyway, I went on a tangent again. It's Sunday, right? It's Sunday. It's Sunday. Now, every time, so quite often I would walk in this area. And every time I would walk in this area, I would walk faster. And there was something, there was like nothing there. You know, it was like going into some kind of warp, you know, time warp or space-time warp, someplace, and it felt like cold and weird. And it was not, it was a place which was located in an area which was, to my liking in Paris, nice, but this space was cold. It was a cold spot in a nice area. anyway, I had kind of noticed it, but then, you know, you notice things like that and you forget them. However, every time I would walk there, I would have the same feeling. So 10 years later, I'm no longer a student, and I don't live there any longer, but I'm with my teacher, and my teacher speaks about things, spooky things. And he says, it's like, did you notice in Paris that when you walk Rue de Rennes near the Boulevard Saint-Germain, you have this strange feeling? And his explanation was, so then he gave an explanation, I don't know what the value is that during the French Revolution, they had the guillotine there or nearby, and that a lot of terrible things took place there. So that the stones, the ground, and the walls of the houses kind of took some imprint. That was his interpretation. I'm not, you know, I'm just telling you stories right now. It's not important, you understand? It's not important. I'm just telling you stories. I don't know. I don't want to create beliefs, you know. So I couldn't care less, actually, whether that's true or not. Another thing he was mentioning is this. He says that if you are a musician and you play an instrument, and if you lend this instrument to a great artist and he plays with it, when he gives the instrument back to you, you play better. So that the instrument keeps. So I've tried that with my tennis racket, with my coach. But it seems that I am beyond salvation.
It may not work for sports, you know. It may only be musical instruments. Wonderful experiment. Well, thank you. I mean, it is just sort of background chit-chat. I mean, it used to be I was always under the cloud of wanting to feel better, and so it was always, what is, you know.
And apparently this type of spiritual or non or anti-spiritual association with objects it can take place not only with physical objects such as a place, but it can take place with subtle objects such as a mantra. That if you take something like the Gayatri mantra, for instance, is not a mantra. If you hear the translation of the words, it is not something like you are that, or it is not it's not an expression of the direct path. You see what I mean? It's something nice, but the mantra itself, so many billions of people have chanted it so many times that there have been an entanglement there, a spiritual entanglement with a subtle object.
Well, there's this whole concept of memes, I think they call it. You know, kind of ideas that take on a life of their own that only exist as subtle objects in people's minds.
So really we should destroy this recording because although I've been cautious and say that I'm talking about what people say, caveats, yeah, many caveats.
Well, one final, perhaps quick one. When you were going through the Sanskrit terms, there was one that I've heard many times that I didn't.
Avidya?
It's Atman?
Brahman?
Atman?
Atman.
Yeah.
Atman means, in fact, it means consciousness. It means our reality as human beings. Atman means the reality of the jiva. The jiva is a human being. Atman is the reality of the jiva. So ultimately our reality is Chaitanya, consciousness. But in ignorance we believe that there are many Atmans as there are jivas. But in fact there is only one Atman that is shared by all the jivas. And this Atman is identical to Brahman. So the fundamental equation is Atman equals Brahman. That's the E squares equals M2C4 plus P2C2. That's Einstein's formula.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So I have one more spooky stuff.
No, we could.
So whenever you go to Europe, I have a lot of fighting with my wife. But when you are back here, the relationship is so harmonious.
Francis, I have a question about open-mindedness and closed-mindedness. But first, I wanted to make a comment to the gentleman who mentioned that his wife blocked the driveway. Remember, when a lady says no, she really means maybe. I've always considered myself as an open-minded person, and of course that may in itself be prima facie evidence of closed-mindedness. You know, I'm not sure. But I was always very curious as a child and curious-minded. And especially in law school, you receive the training of mental suppleness in a way, in that you'll look at a case and the professor will present a case and they'll say, okay, you argue that side, but then you can switch and make the same argument. So you can look at the facts and see the facts in a different way, and make a different argument. And it's good training, because obviously one of the traits of a good lawyer is to be objective for their client and not become identified with their cases. And another thing you see in, especially in litigating cases, is how one set of facts can have such various interpretations by different witnesses. There's one set of facts, and you interview one witness, you interview another witness, you get affidavits, sworn statements from the witnesses, and they're sometimes markedly different, because they all have their relative perceptions. And so with that training, you know, I kind of look at my belief systems, and it's interesting to see if I can catch a signal whether there's an attachment to the argument I'm making. And one thing that comes up is kind of the sense of being right, or the feeling of being right. And in a way I thought, well, maybe that's kind of an indication of some sort of attachment or closed-mindedness. But then in another way, you know, if I'm having a conversation with my teenage son about the effects of alcohol in driving, and having been a teenager myself and maybe had a couple beers and driving and know, well, hey, yeah, I thought everything would be okay, but it's not okay. I may have a sense of right, but there's really no attachment to that. It's a matter of experience, of direct experience. So the feeling of being right doesn't necessarily mean that there's a closed-mindedness or an identification with the argument. Another, of course, might be if there's an emotional charge to the argument. That's That's an indication. But I was wondering if you can speak a little bit about the indications in terms of discourse that would be signals of a closed-mindedness or perhaps interpreting facts based upon a identified belief system.
Yes. Well, that's a very good question. And there are several remarks. You know, the first one is regarding this exercise of advocating for both sides. You know, there was in ancient Greece, in Plato's time, there was this school of thought called the Sophists. And the Sophists, of course, all the Greeks were lawyers, and we have a living proof here. That was the national sport, because they liked talking, you know. And so the Sophists, their training was to learn how to advocate both sides of the issue. However, they went beyond that on philosophical ground, and their main proposition was that there is not really a just side, that you can, depending on your skills, make one side just and the other side unjust, etc. And of course, Socrates was going against that and was vehemently against that in his, I think it's one of the dialogues which is called the Sophist, but I'm not sure whether this dialogue has his name, but I remember reading that in my Greek classes in my childhood. Anyway, and which means ultimately, yes, there is often a just side. The question is, what is the just side? It is the side of God? Is it the side of the Scripture, of the Ten Commandments? Is it the side of commonly accepted social values? Is it the side of political correctness? Which side do we take? What is, from the vantage point, let's say, of Socrates, what is the just side? One first answer would be, it is the side that is the impersonal side. Or another answer, beginning of answer to this would be, it is a side which is devoid of ignorance. It is a side that scraps everything which is personal. Let me give you a few examples. Let's talk about political correctness, for example. What does political correctness mean? It means not to make a statement which we know to be true in order not to offend people. Is this type of attitude based on the criteria that I have just mentioned a correct one? Is political correctness correct? It means putting personal feelings above truth, right? That's what it means. It means I'm not going to give examples of political correctness, but each of us can fill the blank, you know. I give the general feeling. We don't say something which is true in order to not to hurt feelings, which are obviously feelings that go against the truth, right? In other words, by doing so, we postpone the revelation of the truth. We keep the truth under the cover, under the pressure. So obviously, this is not in line with truth. Obviously, this is how can I say, devious or a deviation from truth. So that takes care of one aspect of things. We have to make this determination. What is the side of truth? What is impersonal? What is what goes in the direction of the greater good? What goes in the direction of the beautiful? What goes in the direction of the true? The true, the good, the beautiful, the three expressions. So, if in our judgment we do our best to speak from this determination, from this perspective, two different individuals trying to come from the same perspective may differ in because their life experience may be different. But because they are both truth lovers, they will recognize the integrity in each other. You see what I mean? In other words, they will recognize that whatever the other person is saying or thinking doesn't come from a mean-spirited area, but comes from a best attempt to uncover the true, the good, and the beautiful from the situation. And in this exchange of views, there will be ultimately some form of consensus, perhaps not on the means, but certainly on the ends of the common goal of what should be done in a given situation. What is important also is that as we mature spiritually, what was seen in the beginning as oppositions or mutually exclusive alternatives is gradually seen as more in terms of complementarities, and eventually in terms of oneness. You see what I mean? Just as an object, a physical object, has many sides and can be contemplated from many sides. Now, what happens often from the vantage point of a teacher, or of the teaching, is that teachers have this, or seem to have this fixation of always wanting to speak of the other side of the object you are talking about. In other words, you are seeing this side, and the teacher is going always to place himself from the other side and say, well, perhaps your side is blue, but my side is red, you see.
Lawyers tend to have the same propensity.
So you understand what I mean, right? And there is nothing in that, nothing really it is a desire of mutual cancellation, so that we can find our common ground in the middle. You see, that's the middle way, if you will, in a sense. This cancellation of the pairs of opposite, so that we can unite in the center. But that doesn't equate with relativism, which is tantamount to say that Hitler and Ramana Maharshi are the same. Of course not. It's not this type of thing we are talking about. Well.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to make one comment about sophistry, because a lot of people equate the legal system with sophistry, and sophistry, making what is just look unjust for the sake of winning, is immoral in a way. And in a case that a lawyer receives, I found over many, many years, there's always something just in almost every case. And you may disagree with the facts, and you might have a very unlikable client, but there's something in the case that is worthy of argument, that has its roots in justice. And so as long as there is that basis, there's something, I think, to ethically
you are entitled to present it.
To present and ethically argue. And I would hope that most...
To put some lipstick on it, to dress it with Gucci and shoes.
You just allow the wellspring of truth and justice to be
make it beautiful,
to be shared by the jury. And I would hope most lawyers, and I would hope most lawyers feel the same way about that. But thank you, Francis.
I'm afraid you were advocating a lost cause here.
I had a quick question to follow on from the feeling of meanness moving from behind the eyes to more towards the back of the head, and how to view that correctly. I'm thinking it's still viewed correctly as phenomenal experience versus non-phenomenal experience, but is it perhaps a continuum where the more openness there is, perhaps the more ability there is to experience non-phenomenally?
Yes, you are correct in saying that it is a phenomenal experience which is the impact on the body, if you will, of a non-phenomenal experience. You know, there is this story about, I don't know, it's an old novel, The Invisible Man. Have you read it? And at the end, I mean, the police goes after the invisible man. And the end of the invisible man is that although he's invisible, on that day there is snow on the ground. And he leaves, of course, tracks, his footprints on the snow. And that's how they can kill him. He's not invulnerable, he's just invisible. So these phenomenal sensations are the footprints on the body level of the invisible presence. They are the footprints on the body level of an experience which itself is not phenomenal. they are the footprints on the snow of the body, on the dust of the body of Shiva dancing.
Thank you.
Hello, Francis. You've said before, and you said it yesterday, that negative feelings are the result of ignorance, of an identification with the body, and that happiness is our true nature. But how do I resolve, in my own case, when I do feel happiness, it doesn't seem any less identified with this body-mind as the miserable times do. They seem quite, I mean, I feel in a certain way my joy often feels attached to myself the same way.
The moment you realize that this body-mind is mortal, the happiness is not going to last for too long. If you identify with the body-mind. So there are moments of happiness when we forget. The French philosopher Pascal, who had had the experience of truth, he was calling that the activities distraction, which are kind of an escape. He was, which is a very lousy example in my view, but he was giving as an example people playing the tennis of the time as a form of distraction. It was called the jeu de paume, you know. It's not a British invention, by the way. I'm sorry, Jonathan, but it's a French thing. Well, that was my answer. Distraction. There are other moments of happiness when it's kind of ignorance, as I say, sometimes went for a nap. Then in the meantime, we are having a party. It's like the parents went on a holiday somewhere and left the house, you know, to the teenagers. So, but then they come back, and then there is a price to pay.
This is just a question about meditation. What seems to happen with me recently is my mind just gets pretty quiet, and then I go into kind of a dream state. I'm not asleep, I'm not nodding off, I'm perfectly awake, but I'm not having everyday thoughts, I'm having more like dream thoughts. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, you haven't appeared in any of them yet, but is that helpful? Does it matter? Whatever. Could you comment on that?
the short answer is it doesn't matter at all.
That's what I suspected.
And the very fact that you asked this question shows that it kind of mattered still a little bit. It doesn't matter at all. My teacher was giving the example that because the path to meditation is through a shift of interest away from the object back to presence. The less interesting the object, the better. The better a vehicle the object is. He was taking as an example, using his words, the tick and the tock of a clock. I mean, nothing is more boring than the tick and the tock of the clock. So in the beginning you hear it, and then there is a kind of a shift of focus, like from let's say the tick and the tock are like objects in the foreground, and then at some point you get tired of watching these objects in the foreground, and you kind of defocus from them, and then the mountains and the sky and everything comes into focus. It is a little bit the same thing here when the object in the foreground, on the foreground, kind of we get completely detached from them, and at that moment the background kind of begins revealing itself as peace, that which takes place as we fall asleep, for instance. But if we meditate still expecting a positive experience, you see, out of the meditation, then our very expectation prevents this shift from occurring. We should be completely indifferent to whatever is present. This is nonsense floating around. It's in a sense it could be said that it is very similar to dreaming while we are still awake.
I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, from originally maybe thinking about something that I need to do later today or something somebody said, which then I can kind of get caught in for a while. But when I shift into this dream mode, it's all just nonsense and it's flowing, and I don't get caught in it, and yet I'm still very much awake.
Now,
but I've never had this happen till recently, so I just...
Yeah, and now something you may observe also is that it is not solely in the realm of irrational imagery, like an irrational slideshow unfolding. But there are also bodily sensations that are connected with this irrational imagery. Just food for thought and experiencing. It's important to release not only the thoughts, but also the bodily sensations and feelings to the space in your meditation. And then you'll see that there is an interplay of these irrational elements between these images and the body level. It's back. Yes, some... where was I?
The bodily sensations. I have that experience in night dreams. I'll sometimes wake up from a dream and I'll be aware my body is tense, or, I mean, I can feel it in the body. This I wasn't aware of it being associated with tensions in the body, but maybe I'll pay more attention.
And it's not only tensions. The body in its natural state is experienced as transparent. When the way we create the illusion of being our body, it's by focusing preferentially, is that an English word? By preferentially focusing on two certain areas. So these areas will get more attention, like the forehead, or they will get more attention, and other areas, as a result, we get less attention. So some areas will become more present, and other areas will be forgotten. In India, where they have a word for everything, some areas are going to become rajasic, the ones that receive more attention. The other one are going to become tamasic or apathic, if you will. We would say apathic, you know. In fact, I rarely say that, because I tend to focus more on the areas that are visible, if you will, which are the ones that are contracted. But the areas that are contracted and visible are the easiest ones, so to speak. The rajasic areas are the easiest ones to deal with. The toughest ones are the tamasic areas here. In other words, agitation is less of a problem than apathy. And so this, just as in this interplay, we have an uneven distribution of apathy and agitation at the somatic level, there is also an uneven distribution of apathy and agitation between the psychological level and the somatic level. Are you following me? In other words, if you have a lot of agitation at the psychological level, that will correspond to a lot of apathy at the somatic level. The general idea is to rebalance the entire thing. And so, strangely enough, a good piece of advice, if people are very agitated in their thoughts, is to become more aware of their body. And if people are more live in their body, some people are very awake in their bodies, but at the same time, they have some kind of laziness, revisiting their mental structures and so on. We are all different. But the idea is to become well-rounded human being, well balanced. It is this idea of homogeneity and isotropy and
that's what sattvic is, this balance?
Yes.
Yes.
Sattva is balance, yes. I'm going to see whether we have questions from our friends online. Uh-oh. Paul, well, we are going to go a little beyond the schedule. Paul asks, in talking about surrender yesterday, it is clear that the one who is attached is to be surrendered, rather than the objects of attachment. However, a lot of resistance comes up around surrendering the separate self and its role as a parent. Doesn't surrender imply somehow, on the relative level, a kind of irresponsibility? There is a hard line of resistance and fear that arises around this. Could you talk about surrender as it relates to parenthood? Is it all simply a matter of right action, as Ramana Maharshi has put it, which will dictate, as it always seemingly has, one's action either in apparent ignorance or wisdom? Yes, it's a matter of right action, of impersonal action. It's also a matter with your children to never forget what you felt when you were their age. That's very important. To be able to put yourself in their shoes, and it should be easy to you because you've been there. You've been there, you've done that. So that should be easy for you to put yourself in their shoes, and there is another term to qualify putting yourself in their shoes. It is love. Now, remember also, as a child, how much you loved your freedom. So, my advice to you would be to give your children the maximum amount of freedom that is consistent with your age. Let's say that if you, at a certain age, I don't know, age 7, and on a freedom scale of 1 to 10, you see that you could give them between 3 and 5. Give them 5. I'm not sure whether my mathematical explanation is satisfactory or whether it rings a bell, but that's the general idea. Give them as much freedom as you can. And the reason for this is that the sooner they conduct their experiments to own the world, the better. If you don't want your child to end up in the military, the best way, because you hate military thing, the best way is to give them guns to play with as soon as possible, so that they can get it over with as soon as possible. If you hide guns from them, prevent them, when they get 18 or 19, they will sign up with the Marine Corps. That's so. Same thing. If you try to prevent your children from falling when they are very small, and when they are small, their bones are very flexible, and they are not there, and their center of mass is very low, so they are not going to hurt themselves very much, and they are going to learn how to be in good balance with their body. And so it's better that they have the maximum freedom. Of course, if they are age 3, you're not going to allow them to cross the street without proper supervision. So that's why there are limits that you have to put. But always give them the maximum freedom which is compatible consistent with their age and also their intellectual and their maturity. It's not only a question of age. Yeah, for some reason our webcast has been going off and on at time. I don't know, we have some problem with our internet connect, with our bandwidth here. Yes, Magdi, we are recording. Mary asks, when engaging with other people, especially friends or family who have strong beliefs and attachments, is it that their strong beliefs and attachments should not be my concern? What is the best approach to avoid conflict? Sometimes it's difficult to avoid conflict. Sometimes you are not looking for conflict, but conflicts come to you. I often had conflicts with my parents who didn't like at all my seeking the truth. I remember one day they visited me in Bordeaux, so I had decided to really conduct an experiment in perturbability. So what I had decided is not to say anything or do anything that would pet them the wrong way, right? So they come, they take a taxi from the station, they arrive in my apartment, and I am there, and I'm very careful not to say anything, so I'm there just meditating, basically, just welcoming, listening, welcoming. To which my mother says, "What are you doing? Are you saying your prayers or what?" So you see, Mary, I'm not sure that meditating is even the best approach to avoid conflict. Sometimes it's your very being, what you are, that makes people uncomfortable, because they like to have you in a box. And the problem is that when you become interested in freedom, you think out of the box, you feel out of the box, and you act out of the box. And that is problematic. But at the same time, they may catch the virus. Okay, Magdi asked for me to raise the volume. Comes a little later. But anyway, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I hope it's better. Now, Mary, the echo, there is nothing I can do because we are not generating it here. These are the mysteries of the internet. Johan, dear friend, can I visit you in Temecula the next year? Sure, we'll be here. Make sure that we are not in Europe, which is usually December, January, and June, July. So out of those areas. And then can you comment on the book Transmission of the Flame by Jean Klein? Excellent book. I recommend it. For those who have joined the satsang late, we are recording it, and we will send you a link to the recording. Just request this link by sending a message through your Meetup account to John Matosi, who is our member of the Advaita channel team who facilitates these meetings. So John is the organizer of your Meetup group. Send him a message via Meetup requesting a link to the recording, and then you will have hopefully the entire dialogue. Thank you all. Thank you.